developmental delay.
You have a developmental delay.
Hi there. It's possible that at some point in your life, you have experienced a developmental delay. It's also possible that right now you are experiencing a developmental delay. Only you know, or maybe you don't know, but I guarantee by the end of this video, you definitely will know. Anyone at any age can experience a developmental delay. You can be 109 years old and still experience a developmental delay. Development is a lifelong process. And let me just go ahead and get this out of the way before I even begin, because I feel deep in my heart and my soul, someone out there in the population is going to find some issue with what I'm saying if I don't clarify this. Having a developmental delay does not equal having an intellectual disability. Okay? And when I am referencing a developmental delay in this video, I simply mean what the words say. You experience a delay in your development due to some event, some trauma that happened in your life. And maybe you're even thinking, why the hell would I care about child development or developmental delays? That's a very great question.
What?
Thank you so much for asking me. Our development as humans, as people, is extremely important because it dictates who we become. It dictates how we are able to integrate into our environment and our society. It dictates on whether we are going to be able to exhibit healthy adaptive behaviors or dysfunctional behaviors in our environment. So I think we should put a ton more of our focus on development because people are having sex. Every day people are having sex. And when people have sex, they sometimes make little human beings who grow up and also have to integrate into society. So the more that we put our focus on helping children and adults have healthy developmental experiences, the better our society will be. I don't got to say else. Like, that's just it. So don't ask me why development is important or why it matters or why you should care about it ever again. You should care about it because you're a human being who is a part of a society. We are all connected. Your development affects other people. Other people's development affect you. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about different developmental theories and the one that I will be referencing in this video specifically. I will be referencing Erikson's psychosocial developmental theory because I like the way that he references birth to old age. I like the way that he has, the different conflicts that we may face at different developmental periods in our life. I just like how fleshed out it is. And for the sake of this video, his theory is easiest to reference. You may be wondering, what gives this hoe the right to teach me about child development? That's a great question. The truth is, I'm no expert. I'm just a girl who loves child development. I'm just a girl who chose child development as her specialization track in college. I'm just a girl who's now a mom whose children frequently experience developmental delays. So that's my ethos. Always seek expert opinion and always do your own research. Carry on. I still believe in other theories and find them very valuable, like for example, Vygotsky's social cultural theory. That's one of my favorites because it talks about something that's so obvious. A person's culture is heavily going to influence their development and what they experience along their developmental path. Not everyone's path is the same. Not every stage is going to look the same for every individual because they may be part of different ecosystems, different cultures. I fuck with Freud's psychosexual theory, where personality essentially develops over 5 different stages. And based on one of those stages, I have a theory that the way that you approach, the way you talk about, the way you poop in general can tell me a lot about who you are as a person. I will not be expounding upon that further. Thank you. I like Bowlby's attachment theory, which basically says, the attachment style that you develop heavily affects your personality and the way that you integrate into society. There's Piaget's cognitive development theory, which essentially just said children think differently than adults, and we should talk about it. So many different theories. None of them are all perfect. I don't think Erikson's theory is perfect. Again, it's just easier for me to reference in this video. Now that I've given you some insight on what today's episode is going to be about, I want you to digest it. Sit with it for a minute. Go get something to drink. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will talk about the drink for today's siposium, and we will talk about what inspired today's outfit as well, because I think it's really important.
Of course you do.
I'll see you soon.
Take it off.
I ain't got no pennies on. Ain't got no pennies on. I ain't got no pennies
Hello, darlings. Welcome back to today's symposium. I have with me right now a wine cooler fusion. And I want to give a shout out to the person on TikTok who recommended these specific wine coolers to me. I cannot mention their username. And if they are watching, they know exactly why I cannot mention their username. So yeah. Thank you, though, for the recommendation. I hope you find $100 on the floor this week. Bless you. So, I love a good theme. I'm a theme girl down. So, when I was thinking about today's episode, we're talking about developmental delays, right? So, I went on TikTok and I asked, like, what drink makes you feel delayed? I'm trying to tap into the spirit of delay.
Huh?
And the user recommended the wine cooler. And I was like, you know what? That is perfect because when I was like in high school, my mom would open her wine coolers. I forgot what they were called, but it was like in a little glass bottle. And sometimes they were like bright blue or red. I don't know. Somebody's mama out there was drinking them too. Maybe you know the name of the brand. But my mom would drink those like maybe 4 times a week, and she would just put like little swigs, like with a little bit left, back in the fridge. So I would go in the fridge and just like take little swigs and like keep going back like over the course of like the week, because like why would she leave them in there like that? But anyway, when I was in high school, it made me feel a little dizzy, a little woozy in my head. So I was like, I feel like this is definitely a good drink to tap into the spirit of delay. Is that okay to say? I hope it is, because I'm really not trying to be offensive, just a little bit delayed. And actually, with this brand, I got two different wine cooler flavors. One was cranberry and one was mango. I love combining everything with cranberry because cranberry is like the Nick Cannon of fruits. It really doesn't discriminate who it, combines with. You know what? Out of all the baby fusions that cranberry makes with other flavors, it does a damn good job. So I can't even complain. So yeah, that's why I chose this drink for this episode. And cheers to the spirit of delay. May it be strong with me.
Delay!
Mm. Now, you know what? Clearly, I am already feeling the spirit. But it's okay. Like I tell my children, accidents happen, mistakes happen. Move on. This is too good. It tastes like juice. I taste zero alcohol, so I know I definitely might be on my ass if I finish this. So I'm going to sip slowly. I'm going to sip delayed. As for my outfit, if you looked at me and was like, that bitch kind of like Tommy Pickles, you're right. Ding, ding, ding. That's what I was going for. To also stay on theme, I love the Rugrats. And I think that Tommy Pickles is one of the best depictions of a well rounded child who has a healthy development. And the reason why I believe he's experiencing this healthy development is, thanks to Dee Dee, his mom. She was quite literally a fanatic about Dr. Lipschitz, who was a psychologist who wrote theories on child development. That was always walking around with some book talking about, well, Dr. Lipschitz said this, and that. The hoe wasn't right in the head all the time. But you know what? She was reading those child development principles and she applied them to her children. And it worked out. I don't remember all grown up, so I don't know how Tommy was in his adolescence years. But as far as baby Tommy had the development game on lock. Like he was well rounded. But anyway, that's why I chose this outfit. It's an ode to Tommy Pickles. It's an ode to Dee Dee Pickles. It's an ode to Dr. Lipschitz and child development. I told you I love a good theme. It might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me. I'm going to take another sip or five and we're going to get into it. Okay, so we're going to go through Erickson's theory. I'm going to put some graphics up on the screen so that we can follow along and read through it together. And just so you can see it anytime you need to reference any stage. With Erickson's theory, there are stages that cover different age ranges and also a conflict that the child or adult or adolescent is most likely to experience during that age or stage. According to Erickson's theory, if a child is able to move through the crisis successfully, they develop a certain virtue and they're able to healthily and successfully move on to the next developmental stage. Not being able to get through the conflict or crisis successfully will result in a developmental delay. Okay, so let's get into the first year of life. This is the trust versus mistrust. A favorable outcome would be faith in the environment and future events. An unfavorable outcome would be suspicion, fear of future events. And I also, bringing up Rugrats again, I think that Tommy and Chucky are really great examples to see favorable outcome versus unfavorable outcome, as far as like the first, what was Tommy was like 2 and Chucky was 3 or 4. So the first 3-4 years of life, like trust versus mistrust, you could clearly see that Tommy had complete faith in his environment and that he was going to be okay, because that little was a menace. Like, he just did whatever and took those babies and his parents through some bullshit sometimes, but he always knew and had faith things would be okay. And they did.
They were.
Everything turned out okay for him. Chucky, on the other hand, suspicious of everything, always complaining, always talking about, this could happen, that could happen, this, just very anxious energy. Not his fault. He lost his mommy at a very young age, which caused a developmental delay for him. For the yellow and blue visual for the infancy stage, it says children who are treated with consistent love and care and have their needs met by their parent, they should develop the capacity for trust, being able to trust themselves, being able to trust their caregivers, which ultimately translates to them being able to trust their environment, the world around them. With the second year of life, we get into autonomy versus doubt. A favorable outcome is a sense of self control and adequacy. Unfavorable, feelings of shame and self doubt. It says children should be encouraged to exercise free will and try out new skills. Discouragement or lack of encouragement may lead to sustained self doubt. We have about 3 to 5 years, initiative versus guilt. Favorable outcome, you have the ability to be a self-starter, to initiate one's own activities. Unfavorable, a sense of guilt and inadequacy to be on one's own. It says children should be encouraged to be independent. If a child's independent initiatives and play activities are overly controlled, they may develop sustained guilt. Next, we move on to 6th year to puberty. So about 6 to 12 years old, you have industry versus inferiority. Positive outcome, the ability to learn how things work, to understand and organize. Unfavorable, a sense of inferiority at understanding and organizing. It says a sense of industry is a desire to be creative and productive. A school child should be encouraged in their creative and productive endeavors. If belittled for incompetence, a sense of inferiority may set in. As we're going through the different descriptions and the favorable and unfavorable outcomes, I just want you to think about how easy it can be to develop a delay at any point, at any stage. How easy it is to not be able to overcome a conflict that goes on in these developmental stages because, inadequacy or lack of effort on your parents' part, or because of some things that you may be facing in your environment, like racism or bullying. Oftentimes, these conflicts aren't even resolved and they're just left behind because, people continue to grow. But if you're not solving the conflicts within these different stages, yes, your physical body is growing, but cognitively, you are going to be impaired because there is a part of your development that is still being held back by something that happened to you or triggered you. Okay, then we get to the adolescent school age years, identity versus confusion. Seeing oneself as a unique and integrated person is a favorable outcome. Unfavorable, you get confused about who you are. You don't know who the you are. You just do anything. As young people seek a sense of self and their place in the world, if they feel they lack a sense of belonging to any identity group, they may develop uncertainty about their identity that lasts into adulthood. Beyond adulthood, for real. Early adulthood, intimacy versus isolation. Favorable outcome, you have the ability to make commitments to others, to love. Unfavorable, inability to form affectionate relationships. It says young adults commit their efforts to developing intimate relationships with significant others. This can even include friendships. If they are unsuccessful, they will develop a sense of isolation. We get to middle age, generativity versus self-absorption. Favorable, you have concern for family and society in general. Unfavorable, you only care about your damn self. And that's a damn shame. Generative adults contribute to society and the raising of future generations through parenting. And I personally, it doesn't have to be through parenting, it could be through mentoring. I hate the idea that people who don't have children cannot contribute to ideals and theories and, talk about the wants and needs of children. One, people who don't have children were once children. So they can obviously tap into and identify with what children may need since they used to be children, first of all. You do not need to have kids in order to contribute to raising kids, whether they are kids of family members, family friends, or just regular kids that you may come across, day to day. Anyway, let me finish the description.
Finally.
Self absorbed adults stagnate and fail to contribute to the flourishing of their societies. Then you have the aging years or old age, integrity versus despair. Favorable, a sense of integrity and fulfillment, willingness to face death. Unfavorable, you have a dissatisfaction with life. You scared to death. It says as people enter their twilight years, they reflect on the contributions to society. Those dissatisfied with their lives will develop a sense of despair as they face the looming end of their lives. And for that one, if you wondering why a lot of old be mad as hell all the time, it's because they facing conflict in that old age. The ego versus despair. They're afraid of death and they feel death walking towards them every damn day. So they're just angry and mad all the time because they can't come to terms with it healthily because they're experiencing a developmental delay because they're being selfish or because they're just not satisfied with their life due to things that may have happened to them. So you know what? I understand why some old may be mad all the time, but that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it right. So now that we've kind of gone through the stages and the descriptions of the conflicts and what happens if you can face the conflict successfully or if you can't face the conflict successfully, I want to talk about some characters who you may have seen in a movie or on TV who definitely have a developmental delay so that you are able to, connect the dots and understand what developmental delays may look like. I love a good example. Bella Swan, Miss Vampire Empress, had a developmental delay. Yes, girl, come to the front. Come get this because you were delayed in a lot of ways. And a lot of people failed Miss
Lock
Swan
her
along the
up.
way.
Because if my child was in the hospital from falling down the steps and then out of the window and is always getting hurt around this pastel, see through looking ass man, I'm taking her home.
Which ultimately led her to rejecting any societal norms and becoming an undead woman. Willingly, I may add. I'm going to put the charts up again because we got a lot to reference when it comes to Miss Swan. So, from doing a little bit of Googling, Charlie and Bella's mom divorced when she was like 3 months old. And I'm just going to say that the trust versus mistrust conflict that comes at her first year of life, she did not pass that conflict very well. It was not her fault. It had a lot to do with the divorce. I don't know what the custody agreement was like. But considering that Charlie, stayed in Forks and her mama started moving around chasing a baseball player, I'm going to say that she didn't really have the best foundation. Even though her mom, took on a lover, I don't know what age she was when her mom met this guy. I don't know what Bella's mom's support system was like who was in her support circle. She could have had granddaddies and grandmamas taking care of her too. I'm not saying she didn't have a support system. In the first year of our life, we still think that we are our mother. So any strife, any contention that Bella's mom was feeling, she was probably feeling as well. Going through a divorce that young is not easy. And you know what? Bella's mom didn't really seem like the most stable minded woman. So I'm just going to say that Bella did not pass the crisis of trust versus mistrust. She failed the conflict and, developed an unfavorable outcome, which was a suspicion, fear of future events. And I think this shows in older Bella because you see how much she ruminates on fear and fear of the future, fear of dying, fear of growing old. Like she's just so scared of regular human things. Like she's not right up there. And this developmental delay that she developed as a result of the unfavorable outcome in this first year of life is ultimately what tied her to the vampire community. Because she has such a great amount of suspicion, um, she turns it into investigation. And when she investigates something, which she did with the vampire, lore, she found out answers, which essentially locked her into the vampire life for life. So you see where I'm going with how her developmental delay caused her to become a vampire? I hope I'm making sense. And based on how we see Bella in the movies, I read the books when I was younger, but I cannot for the life of me remember them at this age. So I'm just going off base of the movie. For the second year, we see her still struggling with shame and self-doubt. So clearly that conflict wasn't resolved. 3 to 5, clearly we see that she has a sense of guilt and inadequacy to be on her own. She going riding on motorcycles and jumping off cliffs just because the shiny said, I gotta leave. I'm putting you in danger. She can't be on her own because she has a developmental delay. And especially when we get to that adolescent year for her, identity versus confusion. Confusion confusion over who and what one really is. Like, do I need to say more? Clearly Bella didn't know who she was, which is why she resorted to being undead. She saw herself as, a unique and a person who can stand on her own person and love herself. Maybe she would have been cool, like, yeah, I know you're a vampire, but I love being a human. I love who I am. I don't want to change that yet. I love you. Um, but I'm going to accept my humanity because, there is no pressing issue. Like, I don't got the Spanish flu like Edward. I'm not dying. I didn't get hit by a car and I'm on the road dying. This is just a regular high school girl who is so determined to be a vampire. Because why? Because she has a developmental delay. She don't love herself. And I know Twilight is all, oh, hee hee ha, beautiful love, romance, yes.
I also know book Bella and movie Bella are not the same.
I understand that that is what it's meant to be, but like rewatching it as an adult, there were things that were very wrong with Bella. That Charlie was just like, well, fuck it. Didn't care. And that's precisely why she has as many developmental delays as she does. Now, I will say, I truly believe that as a vampire, she will be able to work through past developmental delays. One, because, all the psychic is elevated now. She can do weird with her mind. And I feel like she'll just have a better head on her shoulders now that she doesn't have the Loch Ness monster and she got put into a different role. It may help her understand herself and be able to heal. God only knows. But yeah, Bella Swan had a developmental delay. Real bad. Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader, had a developmental delay. Now, he was born into slavery. So we're just going to get this knocked out of the way. The first 1 to 6 years of his life, no bueno. No bueno. He didn't have a standing chance in hell to get through any of those conflicts healthily. No, it did not happen. And it's clear because that's why he turned into Darth Vader. And as a result of him stacking up all of these developmental delay coins throughout the first early years of his life, up until, what was his name? Obi-Wan found him and freed him from slavery. He just, they were building up. And that's why when we get to the adolescence years, we see that that is really the straw that breaks the camel's back. Because, you know, as he's doing his Jedi thing, he's doing a good job. He's showing a lot of promise. He's showing, supernatural skill. And, that's boosting his head up, a little bit. But he doesn't have a really steady foundation, a steady ego for his head to be so big. So when we get to the conflict in the Star Wars movies of him fighting with the older Jedi, we see that kind of like 6 to 12 years where industry versus inferiority. We see how his unfavorable outcome, which is a sense of inferiority at understanding and organizing, ultimately led to his demise.
And when I say demise, I mean the death of Anakin Skywalker as we know him.
Because not only in his adolescent years is he trying to figure out who the hell he is, because he don't know at this point. That sense of inferiority that has been held with him since his childhood begins to come to the surface. Because he's not able to understand law and how things like a Jedi order work, he mistakenly lets that ego get in the way and starts making choices that ultimately lead to his damn near demise and the creation of Darth Vader. I mean, again, it wasn't all his fault either. He was born into slavery. And it's not like the Jedi was taking him to Jedi therapy. I don't know if they was doing mindful meditation or something. Maybe they was doing some Jedi mind meditation. I don't know. But it clearly was not thorough enough. Because he had all these low vibrational, heavy energies just hampering him and his mind down, when it came to making good choices about who he is, it just was impossible. He didn't have a chance because the developmental delays were holding him back from healthy cognitive thinking. And you know what? Now that I'm actually thinking about it, I think that Darth Vader based on epigenetics or whatever, passed on his developmental delay to Kylo Ren. Because Darth Vader, that's his granddaddy. So that's probably also why Kylo Ren has a developmental delay as well. I'm not going to get into him because I need to do a little bit more research. I'm not too familiar with this new generation Star Wars, but I know for a fact Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, had a developmental delay. And for my last example of characters who have clear developmental delays, I want to reference the entire cast of Girlfriends because, wow.
The bodies are tea, but the psychosocial child development was toilet water.
Maya, the time where she's an adolescent, supposed to be developing, finding out who she is, she has a baby in high school, which is a really big thing to deal with. So I think that she developed a developmental delay there, which led to her cheating on her husband and having an affair with a man who kisses like a dog. If you don't know who you are, you don't know what you stand for, you make dumbass decisions. Maya was living proof of that. Now, Tony, I think, is a little bit more difficult to really pinpoint where the developmental delay began because I don't really know if I want to say it started in adolescence or early adulthood. But I'm just going to go with adolescence because I think that because of her background, her circumstances, actually, I take that back. Her mother's an alcoholic. So, you know what? I'm going to say she was doomed from the beginning as well because alcoholism is something very heavy that affects families. And if your mom is an alcoholic, I mean, even if she's in, recovery when you are a baby, that's something that's going to hit you hard as a child. So I'm just going to say from the first year of her life, she experienced developmental delays, which caused her ego to have to inflate in order to protect herself, which ultimately led to her being the self absorbed person that we know as Tony. Like we saw in the show, she had a deep rooted fear of having to go back to her hometown. She had these inner feelings of shame of who she was and her background. And that's why I think adolescence really hit her the hardest as far as developmental delays, because I feel like, yes, she saw herself as someone who was unique. But again, she carried a lot of shame and guilt and self doubt from her childhood, from the experiences that she had. So, although I feel like she knew who she was, I feel like she only developed who she was in that persona out of a necessity to get herself out of the situation, to get herself out of that hometown, which isn't the healthiest coping mechanism, but she made it work. But that still doesn't negate the fact that it created a developmental delay, which hindered her from, being in her early adulthood, being able to make meaningful commitments to herself, to her friends, to her husband, to her lovers. Nobody. But at least she went to therapy. In the show, I don't really think it did a lot, but it's something. Now, with Joan, I really think the conflict came around in that 3 to 5 where initiative versus guilt, being a self starter, being able to do things on one's own. Because what we see from her mom on the show is she's very critical of her. So I guess that could also be, I mean, yeah, same age, 4 to 6, 3 to 5. I think that's where she experienced the developmental delay that really held her back the most. Her mom was unable to be a support for her, and it showed the way that she navigated relationships. Like, it was hard for her to be single, and if she was single, she was complaining about it and not ever comfortable in it. And once she came to terms that she didn't want to practice law anymore, she was just really lost on who she was. And although I think the J spot made sense for Joan, I don't really think it made the most sense. I think something like going into interior design or even fashion would have been would have made a little bit more sense for Joan. So the choices she made on the show just really showed how developmentally delayed she truly was. She didn't do a lot of things that showed that she knew who she was. She was pretty unable to form healthy relationships, at least with the opposite sex. And I'm even going to say with her friends too, because I found that a lot of the times their relationships were inappropriate with limited boundaries, but masked and covered up as like, oh, that's love, which I don't necessarily agree with. And with Lynn, do I really need to say
Y'all
much?
don't even need the chart for her.
She was adopted. Her mother was bipolar. Lynn really didn't stand a chance, and it showed all the way through the show. And those are just a few examples. I'm sure there are so many examples in the media, in books, on characters, people who had and experienced developmental delays. If you know of some, put them in the comments. Hell, if you've experienced a developmental delay, put it in the comments. Let's talk about it, because I feel like the more we talk about it, the more that, people are able to come to terms with, wow, maybe I do have a developmental delay, the better off we will be. I know for me personally, I believe that developmental delays hindered my life.
Hindered is being polite. Developmental delays completely uprooted my life. Developmental delays almost killed me. Developmental delays had me hanging around people who absolutely hated my fucking guts.
Up until last year, to be honest. And I say up until last year because I really was confused on who I was as a person, who I was outside of the title of mother, who I was outside of the title of wife, which thankfully is now ex wife. And I was really struggling to understand why I was having such an issue getting to the root of who I was. Like, I knew what I liked to do. I knew things that, I enjoyed and that brought me fulfillment, but I only knew parts of myself. I didn't know who I was as a whole person, because I feel like due to developmental delays and trauma, so much of my life, so much of my being has been fragmented and broken off. So I never really had a chance to paint a complete picture of myself up until last year, where I had to do a lot of inner healing and shadow work, because I was experiencing a lot of big things in my life, such as homelessness and destitution, poverty. And experiencing those topics really will make you have no choice but to think about who you are, because you literally have little to nothing else to think about or do. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but I do remember like around the school age where it talks about a sense of industry and desiring to be creative and productive. I do remember as I was trying to be my authentic creative self, it was either rejected, denied, or put aside. So I really feel like that's where a lot of my developmental delay woes began. Honestly, if I'm being real with y'all, it probably began at 0 to 1 years old, because my parents were a hot ass mess together. It doesn't make sense to me. But you know what? It doesn't have to make sense to me. I didn't make that choice.
Now, I know you don't want to get into talking about making choices about partners. Because, girl.
But knowing who my parents are, yes, they had extensive support systems who also helped care for me. Um, and I did come across a lot of good caregivers, but I also came across a lot of really bad caregivers. Oftentimes, people who were family, who just straight up abused me, did not take care of me, or just treated me poorly for whatever reason. And I think going back and working through developmental delays is simply just reparenting yourself. Because as children, who do we count on to help us through our development? We can't count on just ourselves. We're kids. You count on your parents, you count on your caregivers, you count on your teachers, you count on your peers in some ways. So at my big age of 30, I was having to go back to younger stages of myself and go through almost each and every one and try and figure out what problem happened here and how can I fix it now? How can I resolve it now? Because I can't jump in a time machine
I
and
wish
go
I had a
back
time
and
machine.
change anything that happened. I can mentally, think about different outcomes, but physically, I can't change the energy that my body felt in those moments. The only thing that I could do was bring my current self, who had the awareness and the willingness to go back and have them meet with those younger stages and say things to my younger self, do things with my younger selves that, my caregivers or my parents, should have been doing and saying to me, but they didn't. And I had no choice but to accept that and move the on, because I'm not going to stay ruminating on something that has already passed. That's just going to create further delay. I know I spend a lot of time on YouTube just looking at random inner child healing meditations. Sometimes I just wake up and close my eyes and be like, hey, 8-year-old Chanel, what was something that happened at this age that is still affecting us now? I did a lot of journaling, a lot of crying, but a lot of healing, and I made a lot of progress. I feel like I am focused more now in my life on how I can contribute to society, how I can contribute to my own family and make it better in whatever way I can. And I feel like, if I wouldn't have taken the time to go back and heal, I wouldn't be focused on that. Even with having kids, I feel like I'd be a little bit more jaded and just mad that I have to focus on, you know, other things than myself. That's why I think it's very important for us as, parents or adults who are around other children. It is so important for us to cultivate space for children to be selfish. That is quite literally a part of their development. It's necessary. Children need to be selfish. Like, I was just thinking this the other day. Like, my children are loud as hell. And I have a 4-year old, and they're still in that egocentric mind of thinking like they're the only people here and their needs, their wants are the only thing that matters. That's, kind of developmentally appropriate. They're still learning. And he was just singing so loud. And like in my head, I'm like, does this know I'm in here doing work? Like, does he not see me on my laptop? And then I literally had to be like, wait, he might see me on my laptop, but does he care? No, he's 4. That's what he's thinking about. That's his point of view. It's just him and the TV. He's not really thinking about how it affects me. And I feel like me giving him space to be selfish and to, be loud. If he gets too loud, start screaming like a damn howler monkey, I'm like, hey, you tone it down. You want to be loud? Go to your room. But, even that, like, I'm still giving him space to be selfish. You can do the screaming, just do it in your room. Okay? Letting children have that period of time to be selfish is very critical, very key, and it helps stop making grumpy, dissatisfied adults. So that's why I believe, like, especially from those key ages of like 1 to, I'll even say 6, 1 to 6 years old. I'd say 1 to 8 years old. It's important to let children be selfish as they naturally age and go through, school and get older. That egocentrism it'll tone down naturally because they're naturally integrating an environment. And what does the stage say? The 60 year to puberty. They're learning how things work. They're learning how things are organized. They're able to, think more logically. So they understand, like, yes, like it's okay for me to be selfish, but there are times where, I should not be selfish. And again, that would save a lot of adults because so many adults I find are trying to get out that being selfish that they should have experienced in childhood as adults, but when they do it as adults, it's not coming from, a healthy place because there are healthy ways to be selfish. People absolutely should be selfish with their time, with their energy. There's a time and place for everything. But when you see more unhealthy, selfish things going on, like people just not caring about others in any way, shape, or form, if it has nothing to do with them, this is how society falls. This is how people fall because, again, we're all connected. We're all community, whether we want to accept that or not. I find that children who are not given the space and freedom to be selfish in adolescence or 0 to 6, 0 to 8 years old grow up to be either extreme people pleasers or individuals who just completely disregard other individuals, sociopathic tendencies. Damn, I just went on a whole other aside rant. I apologize. Actually, I'm not sorry. This is my show and I'll do whatever the hell I want. All in all, if you've watched this video and you're like, damn, maybe I have a developmental delay, I highly suggest that you contact a medical a medical professional. If you're into the holistic, I highly recommend that you contact a practitioner. I don't care what you believe in. Call somebody. Just get help. The world, as we know, depends on us prioritizing healthy development of children, of adults, of lizards, of cows, of dogs, of cats. I don't care. Of trees, of the environment. Development matters. If you're someone who mentally, what is the best way to say this? Uh, if you're someone like me who's able to mentally process, things that you have gone through, you're able to mentally think about, delays and how you might have experienced it, but still feel unfulfilled with the thinking and process of it, I highly recommend you get not a sensory therapy, but what is it called? It's like, damn. Let me Google it. Somatic. It's called somatic. If you're a person who's like mentally, I get it, I understand what I've gone through, blah, 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 but it's not good enough, you need somatic therapy. If you watch this video and you found out that you probably have a developmental delay, it's okay. We've been there. Like I said, I've been there. I might be there again. I don't know. The important thing to understand and know is if you're experiencing a developmental delay and nothing is impairing you cognitively, physically, or in any way from fixing the delay, it is possible for you to fix. Just get some help. Recognize that there's a problem to fix. Be okay with that. I promise you, your future, past, and current self will thank you. That's all I got. I'll see you next time. You ever just start talking about one thing and then you start thinking about
Damn, what else do I need to
thing,
put on my
like
grocery
about
list?
the other thing, you're still talking.
Sweet kids afraid to leave is
stupid.
stupid.
To
freedom?
You start thinking about the thing that you're thinking
I
and
ain't
you
got
start
no
to think about the
panties
words
on.
that you're saying.
Bananas,
That's what I forgot. And then you
forgot.
start getting lost between what's coming out of your mouth and what you're
kinda
thinking in
quiet
your
now.
head because you're thinking of two things at the
Psych.
same time. And everything just
I'm
gets
hungry.
really, really
Hi.
confusing. And
I'm
one
way
second you're
too
talking about
important.
one thing,
Hair,
and
long nails,
I'm
long
way
butt,
too
how you
important.
talking about.
Been focusing on two different
What
things
am I
at the same
talking
time.
about?
So
I
now
could
you're
never
just
let
completely
nobody
lost
tell me what to do.
and
I
sitting
know
there
a
all
nigga
quiet
get the
because
dripping.
now
I'ma throw
you
that
just
butter
don't know
doof.
where to start and what to talk about at all. No?